are talking Satan's Slaves, although that is the English name of this Indonesian movie directed by Joko Anwar. Now this is a 2017 movie, and I was put onto this because I saw a poster for its sequel, so I thought I would go and have a check out of the original before watching the sequel. Now this original movie, this 2017 movie, is actually a remake of a 1982 movie. Now I've not seen the original, but as I understand it, this is a fairly kind of accurate remake, so to speak, obviously just kind of modernising things with a few kind of new bells and whistles, but it follows the original quite closely. So, Satan's Slaves, what is the story? Well, it focuses on this family in Indonesia. And although this setup is very similar, because it is set in Indonesia, it does have a certain distinct feel to it. So this is a family, a relatively large family. You've got 4 siblings, you've got the father, you've got the mother who is pretty ill and at death's door, and you've also got a grandmother there. So you've got a relatively kind of a big family. The 4 siblings are all of various ages from, I think, 6 to, I think, 22. And, you know, they're somewhat impoverished. They can't really afford a hell of a lot, to be honest. And the mother is pretty much at death's door, and she kind of dies fairly kind of early on in the movie. And this family being from Indonesia, the majority of the people in their village are Muslim, but although they are Muslim, they're sort of not particularly kind of, you know, super into it. They don't kind of like pray or anything like that. They just kind of, they're into it, but not like particularly kind of orthodox or anything like that. Anyway, so the kind of the mother dies, and it's something, there's some type of presence in this kind of house now that seems to be harassing the kind of the inhabitants. Not long after that, our father kind of disappears on a business trip, and then the grandmother ends up dying in the kind of mysterious circumstances, and one of the kind of the younger siblings is taken ill. But there seems to be some type of cause of this down to Satan worship and a malevolent supernatural force. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. Right, let's talk about it. What do I think works in this movie? So this movie does feel like, although it has this kind of, you know, flavour because it's obviously an Indonesian movie, it feels like it is taken somewhat of a standard haunted house template. But I've got to say, for a movie which I don't think was particularly kind of high budget, it does have some pretty affecting scares in it. And they're peppered throughout. Obviously, they kind of get more frequent as the film goes on, when the spooky stuff intensifies. But there's some reasonable set pieces here that I think do a pretty good job of giving you some quite kind of fun jump scares, and actually has some kind of quite tense moments. So I think it does its job in regards to kind of horror. There's not particularly a lot of gore in it, apart from one scene. There's one scene where there is a kill, which I won't kind of spoil for you, but it's kind of shown in all its kind of gory details, and I think is pretty affecting, to be honest with you. So the horror side of it, I think it does it pretty well, and it kind of, you know, it has that sort of J-horror feel to it, even though it's not from Japan. You know, you have the kind of the female with the kind of the long dark hair kind of in front and all this sort of thing. So it definitely has a J-horror feel to it, but I can't help but feel it is influenced from the more of the American kind of style horrors. You know, we get a few kind of like jokes here and there, just the kind of it will seem very familiar to like the Conjuring, that kind of thing. So I think the horror is pretty good. The other thing I would say is I think the acting is solid here. Now this is an Indonesian movie, so I watched it subtitled. So obviously what I'm reading is not guaranteed to be exactly what the actors are, you know, trying to communicate. But nonetheless, I've got to say I thought the acting here was solid. I sometimes find it hard to really judge foreign language films in regards to the acting, but the physicalities, you know, the emotional performances that we're seeing on screen from all the cast, and we have some quite young actors here. I thought they did a pretty good job here. Our main kind of character is this kind of the older sister, the oldest out of the 4 siblings, and I thought she made a sympathetic, character who has to step up because she is the oldest sibling and really have to kind of take charge of things, and the next oldest one's only kind of 16, so she really has to be the one to sort of take charge of the kind of the situation and things like this. But she's kind of scared and doesn't really know what she's doing. I thought all that was pretty good. And as I've said, it has a familiarity to it, because it does feel like like an amalgamation of things you've seen before, like J-horror and the kind of like the more Western sort of style horror films. But on top of that, so you have an element of familiarity, but it does have this sprinkling of uniqueness when it comes to this, because of the Indonesian flavour to it. We have the burials, they're kind of obviously they're kind of like Muslim burials and things like this, and so they're kind of a little different to what we've seen before. So just these small little touches and stuff, I think, do a pretty good job. There's some pretty effective kind of set pieces. I think it's quite well paced. These kind of scares are kind of peppered throughout, and there's a good use of kind of sound effects here. One of the key elements being the sick mother, because she was so ill at the beginning of the movie. She has to like ring a bell when she wants attention, and we hear that kind of quite a lot. Sort of sounding that there's something kind of like supernatural kind of happening. So I thought all that was pretty good. Do I have any critiques of that? I think the cinematography is is a little dark. Obviously, it's a supernatural ghost story. It's an old dark house. I appreciate that. But at times, I think it's just a little bit too dark, where we can't quite see what's kind of going on. I have to say, although I do think it does have some elements that are sort of feel fresh, for the most part, it feels quite predictable. It's quite predictable what will happen. We'll go and see the old kind of wise person who will kind of advise us and things like this. There'll be a kind of a late act sort of twist where things are kind of revealed. There's a large exposition dump, things like that. So there are some elements here that you feel quite kind of typical of, standard kind of horror films. So this is a remake of a 1982 film. So you can arguably say that the original movie, although I haven't seen it, if it follows the same sort of pattern, was an early entry to this kind of style horror film. So you can't really accuse that necessarily of being unoriginal. But this 2017 version maybe could have spice things up a little bit more, try to kind of mix it up. As I say, I haven't seen the original, so I can't comment how accurately it kind of follows that. All I can say is the 2017 version, although it's fairly kind of well made, I do feel it kind of lacks a little bit of intrigue, because it feels so kind of like very much the same as that you've seen before. And the last thing I would say is I think the ending is a little weak here. It seems to kind of like have this kind of last 15 minutes or so where it throws a hell of a lot of the stuff at the screen. I'm not sure it all completely makes sense. And I'm not sure it all completely landed in the way that it was supposed to, because it does seem they're trying to fill in quite a lot of stuff into the last kind of like 15 minutes, including zombies, including this kind of like this weird kind of epilogue, which I don't feel was particularly well expanded upon. So, it just feels a little bit kind of like truncated at the end there. But I have to say, the majority of this film I thought was quite strong. If you like a good, solid haunted house movie, I think this one is a good watch. If you can, if you don't mind reading subtitles. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.